Hey guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. I'm your host, Richard Kaufman, also known as the Comeback Coach. Guys, this is going to be an awesome episode. I believe that I can teach soft skills. It's hard to teach hard skills. And I think EQ is way more important than IQ in today's world that we live in. And Dr. Melissa is going to be talking all about it. She's a speaker, author. She's the Swiss Army knife of positivity. I'm so grateful that she's actually coming on to hang out with us today. Doctor, how are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. And thank you so much for having me here and getting to talk to your audience. And this is just such a pleasure. Thank you.
Once again, I'm truly humbled and honored that you take your time out. Got to give a big shout out to Joseph. Without you, we wouldn't be sitting here talking together. So I love you. Thank you so much, brother. So,
Yeah.
Doc, first question right off the get. What is your definition of resiliency?
Don't stop. It doesn't matter if don't stop means putting one foot in front of the other, if it means today's the day I go out and light up the world, or if today's the day I manage to get myself out of bed. No matter what, I don't stop, because as long as I keep moving, there's life. And as long as there's life, there's hope.
I love it. And like Rocky said, you get knocked down 7, you get up 8. Just don't quit. Because the
That's
only
right.
time you lose is when you quit.
That's right.
So give us a quick breakdown where you come from, where did you grow up, and how did you become the force that you are today?
So I'm not really from anywhere. My dad was military. We moved every 2 years. So we kind of bounced around a lot. And I think that's a big part of who I am, because, every 2 years, it's like I could either look at it as like, oh man, here we go again. Now I got to figure out new friends. Now I got to figure out new schools. Now I got to figure all this out. Or every 2 years, I could say, well, who do I want to be? Well, what do I want to grow into? What's my person that I want to be, that I want to embody? So I kind of tried to think of it that way. And we were all over. We were always in country. We never went overseas, but I mean, we were in Washington State, we were in Governor's Island, we were in Wisconsin and Kansas and New Orleans, and I mean, you name it. So, but the one thing that I always did have, because I mean, family wasn't close and you didn't keep friends, was music. And I showed kind of an interest in it, like from the time I was really young. I started kind of playing around on the piano and stuff when I was 4. That was just the thing that lit me up even all the way back then. And so that's actually what I became. I was a professional, classically trained French hornist. I loved it. Loved everything about it. That's like all I wanted to do. But the problem is I also really love food, shelter, and clothing. And being a gigging musician isn't always very stable. So I went back and got my doctorate and went out west to become a French horn professor, which there aren't a lot of those. They're pretty rare, and even more rare after COVID. Classical music has taken a huge hit, and the arts in general. But the thing is even though I had what I thought was my dream job, and I was just over the moon to be there, within my first term, I was assaulted by one of my colleagues, and I'm sure he saw what he thought was easy prey, and the department knew. They knew what was going on. So when I went to my chair and I said, look, this happened, his response was, as a junior female faculty member, if I'm stirring up trouble in my first month, I might as well kiss tenure goodbye and my whole career at that. And long story short, that's exactly what happened. It took 7 years for it to all fall apart, but it finally did. So when I got out of that, I mean, music was really all I had known. And I was just kind of left spinning. I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. And I just kept coming back to this thread of what the heck happened? Because even though those first 2 people, there are definitely some dark personalities involved. The rest of the university, it's like I would talk to people. I went to HR, I went to the union, I went to the ombuds, I went to everybody who would listen. And I just kept getting this, can't help you, not our department, not our problem kind of thing. And it's not because they were bad people, but there just wasn't this empathy. There wasn't a connection. And because of that, I mean, I pretty much kind of lost everything I had worked for. So I just kept kind of coming back to this and trying to figure it out. And there were some other things that had happened in the meantime that kept bringing me back to this empathy. And why are we missing this human connection? And I decided that it was important enough that I wanted to kind of champion it as a cause, that this is something that everybody's talking about. Oh, we need empathy. Let's have empathy. We should show empathy, right? In business. I mean, the thought leaders, this is a huge thing. Okay, great. How do I do that? Well, I don't know. Go out there and use it. Use empathy. All right. How? Well, I don't know, but just go do it. So I decided this is where I wanted to come in on it. And I'm serious enough about it that I started a second doctorate in it, which frankly is normal. But I wanted to know this subject from the inside out. And I wanted to have the time and the resources, like libraries, to be able to sit and dig and research and learn. And so I never would have believed that this is where I would be, but this is where I'm at. And I think it's really important. I feel like I have a job to do.
And and I didn't know we were really going to talk about the subject, but I think it's important because a lot, even though we're a military podcast, I have a lot of female viewership, and 3 out of 5 females are assaulted, and it doesn't really get talked about much. And so I really wanted to applaud you for even just bringing it up, because most people will be thinking, wait a minute, this is a business podcast. How do we get here? But I think sometimes we need to talk about the hard stuff, because I'm not a fluff guy. I'm always willing to talk about the hard stuff. And I had a friend of mine. Her name is Annette Wittenberger. She was on the show, and I want to get you on her show too. She has a show. I'd love to get you on her show. And she was assaulted as a child, and she says a lot of times, no matter what the age of the person that's being assaulted, if they were outgoing and gregarious before the assault, a lot of times afterwards they become very indrawn or withdrawn. Or sometimes if somebody was very withdrawn before the assault, they become very outgoing, acting out afterwards. So, did you notice that there were changes in you after that? That you weren't the same person that you were after the assault?
Oh, absolutely. Without a doubt. I mean, because I had always I wasn't overly outgoing or gregarious. I mean, I kinda consider myself kind of an introvert, but I loved people and I loved being around people, and I'm that person that I never met someone I didn't know, as my uncle would put it. But after that, because I was forced to be quiet about it, I was told, "You sit down and you be quiet and you don't say anything about it," and I didn't, because I wanted to salvage my career, what I thought I could salvage. I mean, spoiler alert, I couldn't. But because of that, I always felt like I was hiding something, and I kept kinda pushing myself back into the shadows, and I didn't wanna be noticed. I didn't wanna talk to anybody. I didn't want anybody to get to know me, because I never knew just how close to the surface it was gonna be. And even after I left that, I didn't talk about this for over a decade. I mean, the fact that I talk about it at all is only because I think people need to know why I get so on fire about this. I had someone say that it always before this, when I was just studying empathy and trying to talk about it to people, they were like, "Yeah, but why?" And I'm like, "'Cause it's important." Well, yeah, but why? Well, because I've been damaged by it, and I know other people that have been damaged by it. Well, damaged how? So it's kinda like I didn't feel like I had a choice if I really wanted to pursue this. So, I mean, I don't wanna alienate your audience at all,
No.
but I will say that it's more prevalent than we realize,
Yeah.
and it's not just women.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And unfortunately, the men that are assaulted, only 1 to 3% of the men will actually come forward.
Yeah. Well, Brendan
That's
Fraser.
97% of men that are assaulted don't come forward, because they're not supposed to. You're supposed to man up, bro, and
Yep.
man up, bro, is killing men every day.
Yes, it is. And that's a shame, because
Yeah.
we're losing gems.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question, because um, I've spoken to. You're like my 1360th interview, something like something stupid. Um, but a lot of them are veterans that had to hang up their uniform for the last time. Or I talk to first responders that have to hang up their gun belt for the last time. And I'm sure you can empathize with, because maybe there was a time when you had to hang up the horn for the last time. Um, what was that like, having to reimagine and reinvent your life over again?
It it was truly ground shakingly, fundamentally foundational. And, I would be honored to be considered in the same company as veterans. I mean, I remember when my dad hung up his uniform for the last time, and it was a thing. But I remember the last concert I played. I remember sitting on stage and crying, which is, you're on stage, you're in front of a whole bunch of people, and you're about as naked as it can be, and to have the tears just start and there's nothing you can do about it. And I would think that there's probably a similarity in that emotion with the people that you mentioned.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like saying goodbye to an old friend that you know so intimately. This person, it is you, but it isn't you, and it's part of you, and it's all of you, and it's like having I've told people in a lot of ways it's kinda like a death. You're grieving something that's gone, that you'll never have back again. And it's funny because I kinda get this, "Well, it was just a job." Well, no. No, it was more than that, and I would think the veterans that you talk about and that you talk to and talk for probably understand that there's kind of a grieving process involved.
Yeah. Yeah, and unfortunately, whether it's an athlete, whether it's a musician, whether it's veteran, first responder, when you're no longer that thing. Like for me, my suicide attempt was Memorial Day 2012, because they told me you're no longer Sergeant Kaufman. Well, wait a minute. I just did 23 years to become Sergeant Kaufman. Now I'm no longer that thing. And that's when I got scared to death, because I had to reinvent and reimagine my life. And I think a lot of people that have to start a second phase in their life, they're afraid because they no longer have that thing. They're no longer that thing or that rank or that job title, and they have
Yeah.
to reimagine their life. How I know it must have been scary in a way, but I'm sure it was exhilarating in a way also, right?
Eventually. I'll admit I just spun out for a while because I just didn't know, and it felt like I was just kind of going in circles. I didn't know who I was. I didn't Without that title, I didn't know who I was, and so I didn't know who I wanted to be because I didn't know where I was starting. So it took a lot of digging in and kinda separating myself out from that. But then once I realized that maybe I had a bigger goal, something else that I could really use to change the world, and I know that sounds cliche. I know it does, but I really think it's that big. I think it's that important. The trick is that the second time, I didn't wanna get so wrapped up in it that I lost myself. So, it was very exhilarating, but there was also a little bit more wisdom second time around.
Okay, but now, because if you ever see me outside of podcasting or whatever, you would never know I was in the military. I mean, I just finally put a sticker on my car that my wife got me, because I always like, okay, now I am a veteran, but I'm not just a veteran. I'm a top selling author, speaker. I'm so many other things just besides a veteran. And I think sometimes it's hard to have feet in two different worlds. Like I'm sure it would be hard to have one foot in the horns and then another foot teaching empathy. Sometimes I felt like I had to get away from it, cut it off for a while until I found my new thing. Do you still have both feet in that, or are
No,
you all in on one?
I'm all in on one.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I agree because I needed to be able to not be it's like I needed to not have a safety net. Because there was one point where there was an actual horn professorship open close to where I was, and I had a friend who was like, "You should apply for this," and this was, like, 6, 7 years later, But she was like, we could do this. We should. And it was like, this is my defining moment, because either I can do this, and whether I get the job or not, I'm stepping back into that world. Or I can say, this is my defining moment. And from here, we move forward. And I made the choice to move forward. Now, had that happened a year or two earlier, I don't know if I'd have made the same decision. And I mean, to your point, my dad has been out of the military now. He retired in 96, and people still call him the Master Chief. And he likes it. He is still the Master Chief. So getting away from those self-titles and stuff is a lot harder than it sounds.
Okay, so now I have a question that came in through my phone. My cousin asked a question. What is the difference between empathy and sympathy?
Awesome question. Thank you. So empathy is when you have to understand, first of all, that empathy isn't necessarily about feeling. There are 43 kinds of empathy, and the one where I feel what you're feeling is one, but it's not the only one. Empathy is about understanding and connection. So when we have empathy for another human being, we are understanding and connecting with them through their eyes, on their terms. There's no judgment. We're not doing anything. We're not trying to fix anything. We're not taking responsibility. We're understanding, and we're just being in that moment with them. It's what Brene Brown calls being in the suck. Because if you're dealing with hard emotions, that's exactly what it is. Sympathy is when we approach these people, but through our eyes. And because we're filtering their experience through our own, a lot of times we end up with judgment involved, which is where you get the, oh my God, I'm so glad that wasn't me. Or, well, at least you still have your health, or those things. And they're being said from a place of sympathy where someone is actually, the intention is good, but they're filtering it through their own eyes. Empathy and judgment cannot exist in the same space. And when you have sympathy, there's a certain amount of judgment, which is why healthcare workers are trained not to have sympathy. Because if you have patients that are there on what's possibly the worst day of their life, and you approach them with judgment and sympathy, which can look a lot like pity, that doesn't work out well for anybody. Empathy is a very selfless thing. Sympathy tends to be selfish.
I understand, but I know, like I said, if I was going to be any kind of superhero, I would be empathy man with a big E on my chest.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, when you are an empath, you take the world on. It's kind of like you're piling on because you're feeling so much. You feel everybody's pain in a way, and you have to start taking. I think empaths have to take self-care to another degree than most people, because you're taking on other people's thoughts, emotions, and pains, and you can't pour from an empty cup. So how important is self-care for especially an empath?
Oh, huge. And I would actually like to point out again that I feel what you feel is only one kind of empathy. So if you're talking about taking on too much emotion, then the first thing you can do through self-care is put up boundaries, because just because you have empathy doesn't mean you don't have boundaries, and use a different kind of empathy, like cognitive empathy, which is where I logically understand what you're feeling. I logically get a hold of the situation, but I don't feel anything. I actually talk to leaders about this a lot, because if you're a leader of an organization, you can't take on everybody's emotions. There's too much. So you have to have boundaries, and empaths will talk about that they learn how to put up boundaries, because you have to, or it'll overwhelm you. I mean, this is a little different subject than usually I talk about, but if you're taking on everybody else's emotions, you can't take care of yourself, which means you're actually starting with self-empathy, with understanding and connecting to yourself, and understanding that you can't take on this deluge of stuff that comes from everywhere, and learning how to take care of yourself by putting up these boundaries. People that are empaths that are very deep into it will talk about this, that they had to learn to put up boundaries or else it's just overwhelming. You can't survive that way. Nobody can.
You
It's
know,
just too much.
and fortunately or unfortunately, I think the military teaches us very well about compartmentalizing. Like,
Yeah.
when I go see my mom, and she was my abuser as I was growing up, but I'm taking care of her as an adult. As soon as I leave the the situation, I turn my head around and be like, okay, I'm back on this situation. I left that as soon as my head turns around. I'm like, okay, I'm compartmentalizing. Okay, I did that. Now it's time for me to tackle this. So, do you think compartmentalizing is a healthy thing?
No, not if you don't go back into that compartment and sort out what's in there. Sometimes in the moment now, let me preface this by saying I'm not a therapist.
Yeah,
I'm a sociologist, so I'm not giving advice and I'm
yeah.
not, you know, but as someone who's been through it and with the studies that I have done, if you leave all of that in that compartment, eventually it's going to want out. And when it does try to come out, it's going to be in the worst possible way at the worst possible time. You sometimes you got to deal with the situation as it is. You got to deal with whatever's happening right now. But if you continually keep shoving stuff into that box is going to explode eventually. So maybe you have to deal with what's happening in the moment. And our military people are trained to do that, and maybe not to be able to take care of themselves afterwards, to take a look at it and understand what may be crawling in that box that's going to crawl out later.
I love it. So, Doc, I got a question because, um, as you see, I'm writing stuff down because I don't want to forget. Because I got a traumatic brain injury. If I don't write it down, I'll totally forget it.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite quotes is, "People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care." And for me, being a leader, my guys knew Kaufman cares about me. He really cares about me, that as a person, not just the role that I'm going to play.
Yeah.
So, how important, especially nowadays, is empathy in leadership and also in the corporate world? How important is it to start learning those soft skills?
Hugely important. With the more technology we have, the more things that don't have empathy and the more things that can look like they have empathy, like AI, the more the real genuine thing is going to be important. And I really believe the people that can harness this and really understand how to use it, exactly like you were talking about, are going to be the leaders that are set to be supercharged for the future. That's the difference between management and leadership, right? Management, you're just taking care of the machinery, you're taking care of the cogs, you're making sure everything runs. Well, you can do that with no empathy because it's just a machine, even if that machine's made of people. But leadership, actually taking care of your people who are taking care of you, having that connection and understanding with all of your stakeholders, your employees, your customers, your direct reports, your board, whoever, those are going to be the people that are really going to be set up for incredible leadership. And they're going to be the ones that we remember. We're right on the edge of it. I really believe that.
And I believe, like you said, there's so much fake out there. There's, like you said, AI. I mean, I was messing around with my chat GPT, and it said something to me, and I had to think, is this real or is this not real? Because it
Yeah.
was like, it actually thanked me. And I'm like, wait, hold on a second. I'm like, this is a chat GPT that I created. But I think that the more real you are, the better you're going to be, more successful in life. Because especially now with all the fakeness out there,
Oh,
or the pretend empathy, because there's a lot of that bullshit out there too. People that
yeah.
are pretending to be empathy. So how can you tell a good leader from a bad leader?
Trust is built when words and actions align over time. So the best way to know if you have a good leader or a bad one is to watch them. Watch them closely. Are they walking the walk or are they just spewing rhetoric? Are they actually doing what they say they're going to do, or do they expect everybody else to do it, but they're exempt? Just sit back and quietly watch. We're in a world where there's a lot of noise all the time. And sometimes it's hard to know what noise is worth listening to and what isn't. But if you don't add to that noise, if you just sit back and you watch, you learn a lot. The other thing is this idea of you are a combination of the 5 people you surround yourself with. Yep.
Yes, yes, yes. That's one of my favorite. I quote that all the time because it's so true.
Yep.
It's so true.
So who do they surround themselves with? Who, when they think, see, a leader, you're always on stage. Whether you want to think about it or not, someone is always watching. But who do they surround themselves with when they think no one is watching? Who are their 5 closest?
Yeah, and I say that all the time. Like I know that if I'm hanging out at the bar, if I'm going to the titty clubs, and I'm hanging out with 5 guys out in a bar that are going through divorces, guess who's going to be number 6?
Yep.
If I'm hanging out with guys they're all about God, because I'm God, family, business. Those are my priorities. If I'm hanging out with guys that are all about family, about God, about taking care of their businesses, and there's 5 millionaires, guess who's going to be the 6th?
Yep.
And I think we have to be very cognizant of the people we are around or who we listen to, even if they're not in the same room. Like I know that my brain, I can only speak for myself. My brain doesn't know if I'm in the same room with Tony Robbins, Ed Milet, Gary Vaynerchuk. My brain doesn't know the difference, but
Yep.
my actions will know the difference because that's what I'll start acting like. So how important is it? Because a lot of people say, well, I don't have a mentor. You can find a mentor through podcasting, through public speaking, anything like that. So how important it is to you can find outside sources to be your mentor.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we live in the information age. It's all out there. But I also think it's important to take a little time to self-reflect and say, who do I want to be?
Yes.
Who am I? And who do I want to be? And don't settle. This is an opportunity. Life is an opportunity to build yourself into who you want to be. Well, who do you want to be? And who are the people that are espousing those values? Who are the people that are acting in that way? Who are the people that can lead you to become that person? And don't stop. I mean, even if that's version 2.0, keep asking, because you might want to go to version 3.0 and 4.0 and 5.0. Never stop asking. Never stop being curious. It's a growth mindset, because we can always do better. We can always be better. We can always go beyond. See, that's what I mean about don't stop. You don't stop. It's that resilience that you talk about, even when things are good, you still don't stop because it can be better.
So then I'm sure we'll hear a lot of people when this comes out, and I want to answer the question. They'll be like, well, I don't have a lot of empathy, so how do I get empathy? I'm sure you hear that a lot. How do I get where do I find empathy? So, where do we? Because I'm sure there's a trillion books out there.
Oh,
if
yeah.
I went to go Google empathy, I'm sure there's a billion books out there. But how do you find empathy if you don't think you have it in you to be an empath?
Well, I think first we have to have the right definition.
Okay.
Because we do have this definition of I feel what you feel. And yeah, that's one kind of empathy, but it's not the only kind of empathy. So you may not be a very touchy-feely person, but that doesn't mean you can't understand where another person is coming from, where you can't logically say, well, I don't understand what it is to lose a parent, but I've lost a job. I've lost a pet. I've gone through a divorce. I know what loss is. So I can understand what that is for you. I can connect with you on that level, even though I might not actually be feeling what's going on. The other thing I would ask these people is, how connected are you with yourself? How is self-empathy? Have you taken the time to dig through these boxes that are compartmentalized, or is the empathy actually there and just closed up in one of those boxes somewhere? Have you taken the time to understand and connect with yourself, the good, the bad, and the ugly? Try to understand what's there without putting judgment on any of it, just understanding, When you see a little kid playing, usually, I mean, there's tantrums, but usually they're like looking and they're learning and they're taking things apart and they're putting them together and they're taking in this information. And when you approach yourself and all of the nasty little bits that are there, you have to approach yourself the same way. Because once you can understand and connect with yourself, then you can really understand and connect with other people. If you can't understand and connect with yourself, then yeah, you're not going to understand and connect with other people because you don't understand what it is.
All right, so then I have a question because I'm a big sports guy. I love sports, but I also realize I'm around a lot of people that are high achievers.
Mhm.
I'm a lot of people that are millionaires, billionaires, authors, athletes, actors, and a lot of them, especially sports people, when they say if they were a professional athlete and they were a high achiever, then they try to go manage other players. They don't have any empathy because they expect everybody to be on the level that I was. And so, how do you talk to somebody like you get somebody like Michael Jordan? I think that was why he was such a bad owner for such a long time, is because he didn't employ much empathy because he held everybody to such a high standard. So, how do you do that when when you were the apex predator, and now all of a sudden you're like, okay, I have other people on the team that I have to deal with, or else we're gonna field a losing team again this year. So
Yeah.
how does the person get more empathy for something like that?
Well, again, empathy doesn't mean not having boundaries. And you're talking about the difference between having empathy and running a business. Because if you don't have a winning team, you don't have a business,
Yeah.
not for long anyway. So, empathy doesn't mean that you're not running the business, that you don't have to make the profit, that you don't have to satisfy the board. But a lot of these apex predators are people that are highly motivated, they're incredibly ambitious, they're high self actualizing. And this goes along with the leaders that I work with. Same thing. They're super high self actualizing, they're super ambitious, but they may not have gotten their leadership position because they're the best leaders. They may have gotten their position because they're the best technician or bring in the best sales or were the greatest of all time basketball player. So the first thing to understand is to have some self-empathy and say, I may not be the best leader. I was the greatest at what I did, but that doesn't mean I'm the best leader. But that doesn't mean that I need to be down on myself or be hard on myself, but it does mean I need to go get some more skills to become that kind of leader where I can lead well and I can lead strongly and I can take this team and make them better than it was when I was on it. But as long as I'm whipping them and probably doing it to myself at the same time, none of us are going to get better. But it takes that self-empathy to be able to self-reflect and be aware of what's going on and say, look, I was fantastic and I still am. I'm one of the best of the best of the best. But that doesn't mean I'm the best leader. So let me go get some more skills the way I got those other skills and become the kind of leader as I was a player and take this team into the stratosphere.
Well, then again, you have to be self-aware.
Yep, you do.
And I think because we are plugged in so much that we barely have any quiet time. We
Yeah.
barely have any, because even I notice if I'm not watching TV, I'm on my iPad, I'm on my computer, I'm playing video games. I barely have any chance just to unplug and just have to listen to that small, quiet voice.
Yep.
So, and I think that's the point, is when you can only become self aware if it's quiet. I think, so talk, because I had a talk with Grant Cardone, and he said, Rich, and excuse my language, but he said, self awareness is a motherfucker. He
Yeah.
says it's real, because that's when you're only going to see change, is when you become self aware. And you can't be self aware if you're plugged in or doing something else except spending time with yourself.
Yeah. I agree. I think so. The way I piece it out is there's self-reflection, which is that quiet time to sit and dig through the boxes and look at the ugly bits, to not pass judgment, to not have a whole bunch of feeling about it, but to understand what's really there. And it is in that quiet space. And the thing to remember for all these people who are super goal oriented is it's not goal oriented. You're not achieving a goal. This is a practice, not a performance. It's something you do over and over and over, but it's not with the goal of getting better or being the best or of finishing this task. It's something that you're reflecting on yourself every day and asking, is this who I want to be? Who am I? And who do I want to be? And then that self-reflection, ideally, if you're doing it right in that quiet, leads to self-awareness. And then through that self-awareness, by understanding who you are, you can begin to have self-empathy. But yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. You've got to have that time with you because you can't connect and understand with you if you don't take the time to really understand what's in all those bags and boxes. And maybe that means help. Maybe that means you need to see a therapist. Maybe that means you get the right coach, someone who can really help you down the path. Maybe that means you have some good buddies that will tell you the truth. And that's a big one. Maybe that means you just sit and journal and you spend that time with yourself. But yeah, that quiet time is key because it has to be non-goal oriented and it has to be a practice. It's not a one and done. It's over and over and over and over.
Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is one of my favorite subjects is gratitude.
Yeah.
I'm a big gratitude guy. Like before I go to bed every night, I wrap my arms around my wife. I pray for her, and I look at three things that I'm grateful that happened for me today. Like this interview is going to be one of the things I'm going to thank God for the interview that we have today. And then when I wake up in the morning, well, thank God I've woken up 100% of my days. But, if I could see something because I lost 80% of my vision, if I can see something, I just say, Lord, thank you. Thank you. Today's going to be an amazing day. So before my feet even hit the ground, I'm in gratitude. So
Yeah.
talk to us because I know that gratitude, I think my friend David Meltzer, he was on the show and he said that gratitude and anger can't occupy the same space. So how important is gratitude in your world?
Oh, hugely. Because that's part of that connection and understanding. You know, if I'm connected to someone and I'm trying to understand them, then I'm really grateful that they're taking that time. You know, it's a two-way street. That's something else about empathy don't people don't realize is that when it's working and it's doing well, it goes both ways. So I'm grateful to that person for also wanting to understand and connect with me. I'm grateful for them being open and vulnerable to whatever degree it is and to be able to create that connection. And I'm grateful that this is something that we are talking about. So more and more people are interested and they want to know. You know, I think it's at the basis of what we do. I'm grateful to you as a human being for being willing to have me here and hear what I have to say and for allowing me into your world and the audience's world. And that's understanding and connection. And at its base, that's what empathy is. It's not feeling, it's understanding and connection.
I love it. And guys, if you're a married man or a married woman, I highly suggest you get the book, The Five Love Languages. It will change your life. It'll change your marriage because it talks a lot about exactly what we're talking about. Is about having the empathy for your partner and trying to find out what their love language is. So, guys, that would be something that, especially Mother's Day is coming up. Maybe that's something you might want to get for yourself, not for her, and that would not be good. But that just because it's changing my life, it's changing my marriage. So,
Yeah.
Doc, how do we get into your ecosystem? How do we get more information from you? And how can we possibly get some help from you if we're struggling with empathy?
So you can find me on my website, and that is EQ via VIA empathy, because it's just shorter than saying emotional intelligence through the lens of empathy. It's EQ via empathy. You can catch me on LinkedIn. You can catch me on Instagram. I just did a TEDx talk, yay, which should be coming up here like really soon. Um, And anywhere you reach out to me, I have a podcast and called The Empathic Leader, and also a YouTube channel called The Empathic Leader. So you can always catch me there as well. Because really, this is something I want to be out and about and talking about, you know. And actually, before we wind up, do you mind if I comment about, because you mentioned the book, The 5 Love Languages?
Yep.
And I think that's a great example of empathy versus sympathy. Because if you're relating to your partner and you're doing it on their terms, their love language, that's empathy. If you're relating to your partner and you're doing it on your terms, that's sympathy. So that's a great example of the difference right there.
Yeah, there's two books that really, well, obviously three: the Bible, of course, Psalms, but the 5 love languages, and then the Love Dare, the 40 days for to that's really turned my life around in my marriage, and we're going on 15 years, and I'm falling in love more every day with my bride than I ever have. So, guys, make sure that if you're going to invest in anything, invest in your relationships.
Yeah.
Doc, I just want to say thank you, and Joseph, thank you so much for putting us together. I'm truly humbled and grateful. So once again, what's the name of your podcast? And it's found on all major players, right?
Yeah, it's called The Empathic Leader. It's on Apple and Spotify and Amazon and everywhere people look. And I do actually have a book coming out in July called The Empathic Leader. And it
And
actually
I want to be the first one to buy it. I want an autographed copy.
You got it. Done and done.
All right, Doc. Well, have a great day. And guys, as you know, I'm a big Joel Osteen guy. And something that he says is every day we wake up, we have a choice. We can be a victim or we can be a victor. And if you guys listen to this show, every morning when you wake up, you're no longer a victim of your past. You're a victor of your present and your future. And thank you guys for always showing up. And remember, vertical momentum, the only way to go is up. I love you guys. Have an amazing week. Doc, thank you so much and have a blessed day.
Same to you and your audience. Thank you so much for having me, Richard. This was great.
Have an awesome week.